Earthbound. To many gamers today, the name evokes nostalgia, curiosity, and a deep affection for one of Nintendo's most unique adventures. It's a game that breaks the mold, blending humor, emotion, and offbeat charm into a role-playing experience like no other. But the road to that legacy was anything but smooth. When Earthbound first launched in North America in 1995, it didn't just slip quietly under the radar, it flat out failed. Nintendo had high hopes, but sales fell flat. Most players never even gave it a chance, and yet 30 years later, Earthbound is hailed as a cult classic, one of the most beloved RPGs of all time. So, how does a game go from a commercial failure to a legend? This is the story of Earthbound. Let's rewind the clock and explore what really happened with Earthbound, why it bombed in America, and how it slowly earned its place in gaming history. In Japan, Earthbound is known as Mother 2. It was created by a small team at Ape Inc. and HAL Laboratory under the creative direction of Shigetsuto Itoi, a copywriter and essayist with no background in game development. That might sound like a strange choice, but it's part of what made Earthbound feel so different. Instead of knights and castles, Earthbound dropped players into a world that felt oddly familiar. A satirical version of 1990s America. Towns had burger joints and arcades. Enemies weren't goblins or dragons, but cranky neighbors, exploding robots, and evil hippies. You don't ride airships, you took buses and visited hospitals, and your weapons? Baseball bats, yo-yos, and frying pans. You played as Ness, a psychic-powered kid who teams up with three friends, Paula, Jeff, and Pooh, to stop a terrifying alien entity called Gigas. The story is bizarre, funny, heartfelt, and at times deeply unsettling. But Earthbound wasn't just weird for the sake of weird. It had heart. It explored themes of childhood, courage, trauma, and growing up, all wrapped in a deceptively simple-looking RPG shell. It was personal, emotional, and completely different from anything else on the market at the time. But that difference came with a cost. When Earthbound was finally localized and prepped for its US release, Nintendo of America didn't know how to market it. The game was quirky, yes, but that doesn't mean the campaign had to be. Unfortunately, the strategy they chose leaned hard into gross-out humor. The official slogan was, "This game stinks." The marketing featured scratch and sniff stickers, weird print ads, and oversized packaging that included a strategy guide. It was loud, in your face, and completely off-tone for what the game actually was. Sure, Earthbound had humor, but it was dry, clever, and satirical. Not fart jokes, not nose-picking. And the price point didn't help either. Earthbound's bigger box and bonus guide made it more expensive than other games on the shelf. Many retailers didn't want to carry it because it took up too much space, and the marketing confused potential buyers more than it excited them. Even worse, no one really knew what the game was. Trailers were vague, screenshots looked odd, and most American gamers had never played the original Mother on NES because it was never released outside of Japan. So Earthbound was essentially a sequel to a game that didn't exist in the West, and it showed. Quick pause here. I checked the channel stats the other day and saw that over 90% of you watching right now aren't subscribed. If you're into hidden Nintendo history, lost games, or deep dive stories that the algorithm doesn't show you, hit the subscribe button. This kind of content takes a ton of digging, and it helps way more than you think. Alright, back to it. Earthbound's charm lies in its quirky, often satirical view of American life, but irony doesn't always survive translation. The localization team, led by Marcus Lindblom, did a phenomenal job of adapting the humor, adding clever cultural references and witty dialogue that still holds up today. But the game's sense of humor was subtle, and not always what gamers expected. Imagine being 13 years old in 1995, walking into a game store, and seeing Earthbound's box. It's huge, it smells weird, and you look at the screenshots and they show some kid fighting a pile of puke. How do you explain that? Many gamers passed it over simply because they didn't know what to make of it, and those who did buy it, the battle system was different, the setting was strange, and the emotional core of the game wasn't always immediately obvious. Earthbound wasn't a fast-paced, easy-to-grasp RPG, it was a slow burn, a personal journey. For a generation raised on action-packed games like Mortal Kombat, Sonic the Hedgehog, or Super Mario World, Earthbound just didn't fit. Critics, on the other hand, were intrigued. Many gaming magazines praised Earthbound's originality and depth. Some compared it favorably to Final Fantasy and Chrono Trigger, which had started gaining traction in the West. But praise didn't translate to sales. Earthbound sold just over 140,000 copies in North America. Nintendo printed far more than that. It was considered a flop. The game was quietly shelved, and the idea of bringing over Mother 3, its sequel, was scrapped entirely. For years, Earthbound disappeared from Nintendo's catalog, a strange, failed experiment that no one wanted to talk about. But the fans did. By the early 2000s, something started to happen. On message boards like starmen.net and early GameFAQ forums, fans began singing Earthbound's praises. Some players had held onto their cartridges, others discovered the game through emulators. They talked about its humor, its music, its unforgettable ending, and that haunting battle against Gigas. The game started appearing on underrated classics lists. Fan art exploded. The demand for Mother 3 translation grew so large that fans eventually created their own, a massive undertaking that took years and became legendary in the ROM hacking community. And when Super Smash Bros. Came out for N64, there was Ness, a surprise character pick that confused many players, but thrilled Earthbound fans. It was the beginning of Earthbound's redemption arc. In 2013, Earthbound was finally re-released on the Wii U Virtual Console, and it exploded in popularity. Many who had missed it in the first time finally gave it a shot, and that came with a tidal wave of appreciation. Modern developers took notice too. Indie games like Undertale and Omori clearly draw inspiration from Earthbound's writing, tone, and turn-based combat. The quirky yet emotional formula that Earthbound pioneered is now a genre form of its own. Even Nintendo has warmed up. They included Earthbound again in the SNES Classic Edition. They added Earthbound Beginnings to the NES library, and in 2022, they re-released both Earthbound and Beginnings on the Nintendo Switch Online service. What was once forgotten is now celebrated. So why did Earthbound fail in America? Because it was ahead of its time. Too weird, too emotional, too subtle for a market that wasn't ready for it. It wasn't marketed properly either. Its humor didn't translate well for mainstream players, and its price, packaging, and presentation all worked against it. But that very uniqueness, that offbeat identity, is what gave it a second life. Earthbound failed as a product, but succeeded as an idea. It proved that personal, heartfelt storytelling could exist in games, and it inspired a generation of developers to do things their way. If you enjoyed this kind of storytelling, deep dives into forgotten Nintendo history, retro mysteries, and lost gaming legends, make sure you're subscribed. This channel is built for people who want more than surface-level nostalgia. We go deep here. Drop a comment below. Have you ever played Earthbound, or are you just discovering it now? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.